Well, hello YouTube. Today I'm gonna talk through how I go about making paracord bullwhip. This is the whip, or something very similar to what I'll be making. This is a 16 strand down to a 6 point here. I'll actually show you how to go down to 4 point for your whip. There's a few different reasons why I'll do that. This ends in a 6 point, but the way that I make my falls means that they actually have 4 pieces of cord in here, and that means that I do that because it looks a bit nicer. However, to make making the fall a little bit easier for your first time round, I'm going to take it down to a 4 point, and it also gives you the option then, as your whip wears, it means that you can you've got somewhere to go. You can go back and as it wears and breaks or whatever, you can go from a 4 point and then plait it back to the 6 point there. I probably haven't described that very well, but I hope you understand. Anyway, so first off I'm just going to detail some of the tools and bits and pieces that you'll need. The way I make them is probably slightly different from other people. I'm not going to criticise other people's ways of making whips. There's many ways to skin a cat, but I will detail the reasons why I do the things that I do. And feel free to make comments if you agree, disagree, whatever. So let's get to it. So this is the whip which we'll be making. We'll make a slightly longer one for your first one, just to make it easier for you to use. And there's a few tools and bits and pieces. Now you're going to need one of these. A lighter. I personally prefer a jet lighter. A great thing to have, and the reason I like them is because this is a very hot and very directional flame. You know, I can hold my finger, don't try this, I can hold my finger right underneath it and still not feel the heat, which means I can control that heat quite a lot easier than I can with something like this, but this will get the job done. One of the other tools which isn't essential but would be very useful to have is something like this. So this is a small fid which I've made, and this is just a piece of broomstick, I think, with a nail banged into it, and then the ends clipped off. I've hammered the end flat and made a point, a blunt point, and then I haven't exactly polished it, but I've just made sure there's nothing to catch on the strands there. Now the other thing that's nice about this point is that when you put it in under something, you can turn it up the way like that, and that will create a small gap where a needle or something else can slide through. So that's why I've widened the end there, just so you can do that business. What else? This again is not essential, and I have adapted this one a little bit. So this is a normal paracord lacing needle. This helps with when you're making the knots on the ends. Now, I don't know if you can see it very well here, but what I've done is taken a file to this and just taken down the sides just to make the end a little bit thinner there and make it pass underneath strands without forcing them up too much. So there's that one. I find these very useful as well. I've got a small selection here of darning needles, and I use these again to help fix the knot and do various bits and pieces. Something you might want to do is actually just take a fine piece of sandpaper and just take the very point off them, because if you're going underneath strands, sometimes that end can catch on things, so it's a little bit easier. I even sometimes use them going backwards, but I'll show you that at another point. What else? Something like this, a ruler is really handy. I particularly like this one because it's got lots of tap and die tables and conversions and stuff. I'm of the British generation that the metric thing came in, so I'm kind of in between. I work sometimes in metric and sometimes in inches, which is useful when you're doing things or you're getting information from America. And also a lot of the old tooling, which is the tooling which I can afford over here, is in imperial, so it's nice to have something that can convert over to 2, but again not essential, but yeah, something just for measuring up small bits and sometimes length in between drops and those kind of things, so that's handy. Now this one here, this is possibly the the most used tool that I've got, and it's one I've made myself, and it doesn't look like much, but this is the primary difference between, I think, how I make whips and how other people make whips. And you'll see exactly how that's done, but all this is basically is a piece of wire, and I'll get a set of calipers on this so you can see what sizes they are. It's folded in half, and I actually used a blowtorch when I was folding it to heat up the center section so that I can get this as slim as possible. So you fold it over, put it on a hard edge, and then tap it down, and then again you want some fine emery cloth or something just to polish it so that there's not any little burrs or anything that can catch on the strands as you're pushing it through. Now I probably should have polished the other end as well, but somehow I struggle on each time the same. So yeah, if you wanted to, you could take off any burrs or whatever on the other end, and it's just open at the other end. But this, as you'll see as we go on, is a very, very useful tool, and I would say essential. Oh, I'll measure the size on it. So let's see. Like cheapo Chinese calipers, you have to take the battery out each time, otherwise they're dead every time you come to use them. So let's have a little look. This is actually, I think, a brazing rod, or yeah, I think it's for brazing or welding or something. But any wire will do. It's not actually copper wire, it's just copper coated, but that's not important. You want something like steel wire. So let's do it in millimeters first off. So we've got 1.5 mil. 1.5 mil for our American friends. That is 59 thousandths. There we go. Okay. You might get away with thinner wire, but it won't be as strong. You might get away with thicker wire, but it will probably cause you issues. Scissors. You'll need a good set of scissors. Unless you've got a very, very sharp knife, when you come to cut the cord, scissors do it best, really, because they cut from both sides, and it means you don't have any little strands poking out. Sometimes if you cut with a knife, as you cut, it can drag on one of the strands, and it's not very good to, yeah, it just makes it difficult to work with. So yeah, a pair of scissors, if you're like me and you leave them around the place and put them down and can't see them again, you probably want like 15 to 30 pairs of scissors. And also this one, this is handy as well. These are a set of, I think they're jeweler's pliers, but they're a set of pliers, and they don't have any teeth on the inside, and they can be useful just for pulling things if you're worried about marking them or damaging them in any way. So those are the basic tools, the basic hand tools, and I'll just very quickly show you how I attach my work to be able to plait it. Yeah, and personally I use a hook for that, so I'll take you over there and we'll go and see that. Okay, so here's my plaiting setup. On this side, I've gone straight into the door frame because I know it's solid, and I know that when I leave, it's going to be me that's filling and painting it. If you're in a rented accommodation, or you want a portable setup, the nice thing about plaiting from a hook is that you can attach it to a piece of wood and use ratchet straps to attach to trees, lampposts, whatever you like. Whereas a vise is a little bit more difficult to transport, but not impossible. But I like plaiting from a hook for those reasons. Now, this hook is set at around the same height, so that if I just bend my elbow, that's my working height there. So yeah, with my elbow bent, it's at about that level. Now you may have noticed I've got another hook a little bit further up, and this one I actually use for measuring out my cord and for stripping off. And while I'm doing that, stripping off the outside layer. The other thing I do here is I often hook on a measuring tape, and I'll show you how I use that to prepare all the cord in the next video. Okay, so let's just quickly go over to the other side, because you can just plait from one hook, but I actually like to suspend my work in between two hooks, and it does a couple of things. It keeps an even tension on the whip while you're working, and it means that you can leave it go really easily. Your whip is just sort of set up as you're working for it, and you can let it go off, make a cup of tea, come back and carry on working slightly more easily than you could in other ways. That's not that you can't do it in other ways, but this is how I do it. Okay, so that's what you're going to need. The other thing, I guess, is a clean floor. It's really annoying if you're trying to work and you're having to pick out dust and grass and wood chippings and whatever from your plaiting. So a clean floor is good. And the nice thing about plaiting is that you can do it, you know, watching the TV or in the dry and warm. You don't have to be outside or in a workshop or something. Yep. Something else you might consider before making a whip is to buy something like this. This particular book I can't recommend highly enough. It's an excellent book. It's what got me into whip making when there wasn't really all that much information around. It was only sort of, I think whip making was quite a closed shop for quite a long time, and it was only when a few of the old timers sort of suddenly realised that it was dying out that they really started to push and try and get that information back out there. And so for a long while there was only a few books available, and this one, it details mainly kind of how to make leather whips, but most of it is applicable to paracord whips, but it also goes into some history and different styles, stock whips and snake whips and all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to show you too much on here because I think you should buy it. I think you should support the people that have put this information out there. But it's a great book to get started with. So that's it for today. I'm going to go and start doing the handle part, and that will be part 2, showing the handle, how I make that, and the core. So leave a thumbs up and a like if you enjoyed it. Questions, comments, all welcome. Thank you.